Good morning, everyone. I'm John O'Loughlin. Welcome to my channel. It's called McDuff Lives, dedicated to the memory of my father, who we call McDuff. His real name, Thomas Francis O'Loughlin Jr. He lived from March the 21st of 1920 to June the 6th of 1971. And we will be memorializing the 50th anniversary of his untimely passing. Oops, my camera just slipped. Oops, I guess that was something, huh? Wow, I just mentioned my dad's untimely passing and the camera just went a little bit nuts there. Well, June the 6th of this year, 2021. And I'll give more details about that observation as it gets closer. Well, what we're looking at right now is the crisis of America and American politics and the continual uh, divisive tactics being applied through the media and politicians and our institutions, every possible way to make it look as though the people that voted for Trump are somehow in some kind of a cult that needs to be exterminated or sent to re-education camps, or just the whole idea of dividing permanently the electorate of the United States in such a way that people who voted for Trump will either be re-educated or excluded or worse. And we know where that type of thinking leads. So how do we address it? How do we turn it around? Good morning, David from Alaska. Good morning, Amber. Oh, great. We're going to have you back soon, Amber. You inspire people, and that's what we need. We need positive inspiration. And that's my message this morning is, reset America. Reset America. Don't be going along with these World Economic Forum reset propaganda nonsense. Let's recognize what's going on and then turn it around. And it doesn't have to be anything really crazy. And, like I was thinking the other day that maybe we should just declare, debts to be unenforceable in our courts. And there's all kinds of problems with something as simplistic as that. But what I think we need to do is to reset our guide star, the point at which we are aiming, to reset our direction as a nation, as not so necessary that we try to recreate the past as it is to have a future that's consistent with the American dream as we have always understood it to be. So, life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. I was thinking about um, the bigger picture of philosophy a little bit earlier this morning when I trying to remind myself of the basic differences between Plato and Aristotle, right? And what I realized is both of them, their philosophy, both of them agreed that the idea of philosophy is to promote happiness. And if you have authorities that are relied upon as strongly as those two philosophers to tell you that, their great minds and the great minds that have followed them for centuries all would agree that what we should be trying to do is to be happy. You know, let's try to be happy. In other words, let's get together and feel all right. And in the words of Bob Marley's great lyrics. And that's what we should be trying to do, trying to be happy. Well, there's a lot of people that don't think that it's possible for them to be happy unless they're exploiting others and making others unhappy. And we can look at it as simple as that. As if you've got some gold and I want it, I'm just going to take it because I'm stronger than you, or I can trick you into giving it to me, or I can, make it illegal for you to have any. Very common events in American history. So why wouldn't I just take what I can? That's a good question. And the only reasonable answer is because I am an American, because I believe in the Constitution and the Bill of Rights and the Declaration of Independence and the idea of every human is created equal. No nobility. But let's add something else to that, because we've been studying this for some time now. And in addition to the idea of no nobility, we also need to add and make sure that we continue to emphasize no races, no um, different generations of humanity, as was so popular with the Helen Blavatsky, um, that theosophical thing, that we're going to understand, that there was all of these different generations of humanity, and only the certain ones are of the most recent variety, and therefore the most competent to lead, and those happen to be the Nordic Aryan, uh, Europeans, to which sometimes they are willing to add the Celts, but only as second class. So the Anglo-Saxon Celtic people is one of the ways that they identify, or really just the Nordic people is probably more of the actual propaganda that people were fed from 1880 something to now. And that is also against the Constitution and against the principles of the Bill of Rights and the Declaration of Independence, because it's only if they can have some kind of pseudoscience like eugenics to back up their notion that they somehow are entitled to take that gold when they see it, instead of respecting the idea that those are humans, that that's their land, that it's their gold, and that you ought to be talking to them in terms of mutually beneficial trade as opposed to exploitation. So where in the world does it fit for us as Americans to participate in the exploitation of other people's resources? Why are we doing that? We were created to not do that. We were created to be a republic of people who took care of each other on a what they called a Christian basis. Basically, it's just the golden rule of I would treat you as I would have you treat me. Simple as that. I'm not going to steal your gold and you're not going to steal my gold. I'm not going to screw your wife and you're not going to screw my wife. You know? And that golden rule idea is part of our civilization. And that's why I would say, no, I'm not going to take that gold from that Rhodesian mine, because I know that it's exploiting the people that live there, that are worse than poor. They're dying. So this exploitation, this economy based upon exploitation, where is it? Well, it is the people behind the Great Reset. That's my opinion. Maybe I'm wrong, but that's my opinion based upon my studies. And I study this stuff. I mean, look, COVID-19, the Great Reset. by the great Klaus Schwab and Thierry Maleret. This book is what they're talking about. I just opened to a random page just a minute ago, and it's this, page 141, lockdown and carbon emissions. Wait a minute. Lockdown and carbon emissions? What do those two things have to do with each other? The lockdown is about COVID, right? We're not locked down because of carbon emissions. We're locked down because of COVID, right? Well, why are they putting these things together? It is too early to define the amount by which global carbon dioxide emissions will fall in 2020, but the International Energy Agency, the IEA, estimates in its Global Energy Review 2020 that they will fall by 8%. Even though this figure would correspond to the largest annual reduction on record, it is still minuscule compared to the size of the problem, and it remains inferior to the annual reduction in emissions of 7.6% over the next decade that the UN thinks is necessary to hold the global rise in temperatures below 1.5 degrees centigrade. Considering the severity of the lockdowns, the 8% figure looks rather disappointing. Okay. So he's tying these things together as if the COVID lockdown was somehow an opportunity to reduce our carbon footprint, right? So we want to reduce our carbon footprint. Well, what's going on right now in Texas, for instance? They're having rolling blackouts because the system is, quote, overwhelmed by this storm. And maybe it is a once in 100-year storm, but doesn't this remind you of what happened in California? What was it, last year when they had the rolling blackouts? And that's why I think that when we confront what's really going on, we have to put two and two together and combine the COVID-19 with their desired drastic reduction in our carbon footprint. And that means our energy production. And that reduction may be going on right now, as is suggested by Paul Gallagher over at LaRouche Pack. And Andy, if you would cue up that video I asked you to have, I think it's time to play this, because what this gentleman has done is prepared a pamphlet on what they have found in their in-depth research, and I'm talking about the LaRouche organization. Okay, so this interview is called "The Great Reset: A Disaster for the U.S. Economy." Interview with Paul Gallagher. And I'm looking forward very much to having a personal conversation with Paul Gallagher. I'm just now learning about his work, but because it's so timely, and because I think we need to find a way to refocus our energy, as I'm saying, on a new star. This is where we're headed. We want to go there. Like if you want to go to the North Pole, you focus on the North Star, and you want to head for there, you point toward it. Our country needs a sense of direction, and it cannot be provided by think tanks in Davos, Switzerland. We are the people that have to direct our own nation. And that's what's lacking. And that's why I call my show today Reset America. All right, let's play this.
Prince Charles, which includes Klaus Schwab. Their
Let's get back
target
just a little bit.
is two: industry, especially the power industry,
and what we need to do in these nations to actually provide gainful employment for people.
Okay.
Well, the target of the Green New Deal promoters, especially the people around Prince Charles, which includes Klaus Schwab, their target is two: industry, especially the power industry, the energy industry, but industry in general, and government. And now that green propaganda is everywhere, many Americans and others are starting to realize for the first time that industry in particular is targeted for deindustrialization. But the fact is, this has been the case for 50 years since Franklin Roosevelt's Bretton Woods system was destroyed out of London by the City of London banks. Deindustrialization has been their policy from that moment in August of 1971, when they managed to break the dollar away from gold and build what they called a floating exchange rate, speculative casino system. Deindustrialization and continual reduction of the role of government. So what you saw, and we have an article on this in the white paper, what you saw from the head of the Davos World Economic Forum, Klaus Schwab, in his new book was a kind of warning or complaint to his colleagues, his associates in this evil business, that governments might take on the pandemic successfully this year, and that if they did, they would be tough to get through in terms of giving up their prerogatives entirely for economic policy and just letting the oligarchs take it over and the central banks take it over. He said, you know, it's the public's idea that the governments have been inept in dealing with the COVID pandemic is crucial to the British oligarchs' attempts to ram through the Green New Deal, the Great Reset now, because that is done over the dead bodies of governments, so to speak, especially the governments of the United States under Trump, Russia, and China. And therefore, they wanted governments to be seen as weak and inept, so that they could run right over them in that way with this green reset policy. And Schwab's book, he makes it clear that they're worried that governments might instead reclaim their prerogatives in the course of dealing with the pandemic. So that was an interesting aspect of what we had to expose in there.
Yeah, and I think it.
All right, would you stop it there, Andy? And I want to make my own comments about that. Yes, so much in that is really worth repeating, and I just urge you to study that little clip there to understand what he said. The idea that the inept response of governments to COVID is part of the plan. Okay? So think of maybe Andrew Cuomo as a sacrifice of some kind, and maybe Phil Murphy too, because they're hanging out there with having done horrible things, you know, with the putting those patients in the nursing homes, and then the policies have just been horrible, and people, have called them out over and over again on Twitter and other places, that what what the heck were they doing? And whereas what President Trump did politically, okay, was to get in front of the issue and stay in front of it as representing government, okay? So that the battle all summer and all fall was about, can they show that government is incompetent to handle a public health emergency of this scale? Because that was what they needed to do in order to then be able to control all the decisions that would lead into the great economic reset of Davos, the World Economic Forum's, wet dream of running everything from central central, great cartels of, extracting wealth from everywhere, giving you a number and extracting everything they can get out of you during your short, brutish, nasty life. That's the same people, right? That we talked about at the beginning of the show that will just, so that guy's got some gold. Let me figure out how to get it from him and just take it. P.T. Barnum, sucker born every minute. And that's the way you look at life if you are running a economy that depends upon exploitation of other people and other resources and the planet generally and nature and all the animals. If there's too many elephants for you to do your mining operation, then you've got to figure out some philosophical way to convince people that there's too many elephants and they're all going to die because there's too many of them. So let's just cull the herd down to about maybe 5% of what it was before we started shooting all the elephants in Africa. But, that's what they do because they don't care about the elephants. They don't care about the rhinoceroses. They don't care about the nature or anything. All they care about is their own self-interest. So we're trying to figure out who's doing this. And, according to what we just heard, Klaus Schwab and the prince who I cannot name, uh, those guys, because the last time I named them, they just absolutely shut my channel down, just boom. So I will not say the name of the person who is that particular person, but that he's a great buddy of Klaus Schwab, and they work together, you see, because the city of London is where all the wealth of the ancient empires, like the Austro-Hungarian Empire, and the people to whom Klaus Schwab is probably a patron, the heirs of the dethroned heirs of Europe, right? Well, all of that money concentrated in the city of London is working to continue that very system, the British system of exploitation through colonial control and owning the sea lanes, the transportation. Pardon me a second. All right, Andy, let's go to the next clip of Peter Gallagher, where it's about 6 minutes or so into the show. You see, what we're talking about is the use of this pandemic as a way to convince the American people that our government can't control, can't handle, can't deal with the pandemic. So we should turn it over to uh, the WHO, right? The world people, the people that really know stuff like, Tedros does. He's a really, really smart guy, right? So we should turn everything over to the Faucis and Tedroses of the world and not worry about our own sovereign interest in our own health because our government just can't handle it, right? Our Surgeon General, what was his name? Adams, I think. And all he wanted to do was talk about, masks. Well, as I was saying, it seems that President Trump actually stood up for government and got in front of the development of a quote unquote vaccine, whatever these things really are. He came up with one that he could say, this is what we did. We did this as the US government. And in that way, he is preserving, protecting, and defending the Constitution by saying, no, we're not incompetent. We can handle this, and I'm on top of it. Contrast that with what Barack Obama did when they did the oil spill during his term, and it was BP, right? And they couldn't cap this undersea leak that they had created. They just couldn't cap it. Deepwater Horizon, was it? I think it was the one where the oil just kept pouring out of it and pouring out of it, and you could see that nature was going to just get killed. And then they had to pour this other stuff on it that was even worse. And now they've destroyed so much of the Gulf. And, Barack Obama just kind of sat back and said, well, I'm going to order the Navy to do this. And I'm going to, but really the Navy didn't really have charge of it. And I think about, what if that had been my father's Navy, What if that had been Forrestal's Navy or Roosevelt's Navy or the real get her done, and they would have just gone out there and they didn't know how to do it when they got there, but they would have looked at the problem. They would have gone to work. They would have spared no expense. They would have put every single asset in the country on it, and they would have capped that well in a whole lot less time, I will guarantee you. So that was an example of incompetent government being planted into our minds that we couldn't handle it. Our government couldn't handle it. So we're going to have to go to this one world thing with the cabals and the cartels and what really is, I hate to use the word communist, but it's a system of depriving people of personal property and making everybody, just a serf. And I'm sorry, that's the way it is, in my opinion. Andy, let's play the next clip from Mr. Gallagher, because this part is even more important than what we've already played.
Sense of kind of your thinking there.
Well, it's as if the ghost of Hjalmar Schacht has come back in this Green New Deal.
Hjalmar Schacht, you know who he is, right? He's the Italian.
The economics minister for Hitler. He was also the central banker, the head of the German Reichsbank. When Hitler, as soon as Hitler came into power, and in fact, Schacht did a lot to raise money to bring the Nazis to power and campaign for them. And what he did, which no central banker had ever done before, is he used the mass printing of money in order to seize control of all of the channels of credit in the German economy. He was able to essentially usurp the spending function of government simply because his bank was printing so much fiat currency and at the same time deploying that currency directly into the economy. effectively took over the German budget. And at the same time, he was able to control and shut down most of the normal channels of credit coming from commercial banks in the economy. So he got fingertip control. And what he did with it was to shift the German economy in 2 years, 33 to 35, from 2% armaments production to 20% of the entire economy being armaments production. Absolutely unprecedented, dramatic wrenching of an economy in a desired direction, desired by Schacht and the British central banker Montague, who was his mentor, and by the British generally for the German economy. So that's the model for what the central banks are doing now. And of course, the most influential of them in this has been the British central banker, Mark Carney.
Well, I think it goes, what your reference to Schacht and the similar kind of deindustrial policy that you outlined there. You very much see this in action with the green agenda and the actual effects of this. I know you went through the case of California as kind of a case study for this. You see this in Europe where they're implementing it. But I think that also goes to some people who think that the Green New Deal is just about building windmills and solar panels and electric vehicles, but perhaps you could just lay out the fraud of that argument, that it's not going to do any of that. It's a near impossibility.
Well, I should just preface this. What we showed in this report, and I think for the first time, is that the Green New Deal is the British crown. It's not any target you want to pick in the it's not AOC, it's not Bernie Sanders, it's not Bill Gates. It's the British crown, specifically Prince Charles, the circles around him for the last 30 years, continuously aiming to do what they're doing in the Green New Deal. Now, the case of California mirrors the case of Germany, where what California has done since 2006 is completely reversed what it used to be for the US economy. Since the late 30s, California came from a very arid, relatively sparsely populated state through infrastructure works, especially water works, to water this extremely arid but extremely fertile soil there. And that was part of the New Deal and then continued under Governor Pat Brown. It came to be by far the biggest component in the US economy, supposedly the 6th largest economy in the world, if it were a country. It has turned that on its head under the Green New Deal, especially with Jerry Brown and Gavin Newsom, and eliminated all nuclear, eliminated all coal. Actually, have one part of one nuclear plant still open. It's scheduled to close in the next few years. Eliminated all coal. They have none whatsoever providing power in the state. They've completely messed up their electric grid to the point where as soon as they tried to take some gas turbine electric plants offline in the last few years, they started triggering blackouts in parts of the state. And while there was a recovery of sorts in manufacturing during the Trump administration, there were about 600,000 manufacturing jobs added in the first 3 years that Trump was president. California during that time, industrial employment did not change at all. And it has been cut in half over the course of the implementation of this policy. In addition, it has by far the highest electricity prices of any state in the country, and in that it's in the footsteps of Germany and of Denmark, where the landscape and the offshore waters are literally littered with vast solar farms, wind farms, and the price of electricity is 40 cents a kilowatt hour in Denmark, 35 cents a kilowatt hour average in Germany. that's where California is headed. And it's trying to import power from a lot of other states and creating a situation which is going to lead to more national grid breakdowns.
All right. Thanks, Andy, and we'll stop it there.
Covered a fair amount here, and certainly indicate what your article presents.
So let's think about California for a moment here. Maybe some of you are in California as you're watching the show, and I'm glad to have you all here. It's nice to see the chat going on there. Yeah, the Royal Institute of International Affairs, Chatham House. That's where they chat about how to conquer us and the rest of the world. Well, California, let's think about that, what he said. He said, okay, under Governor Pat Brown, it was built up to the 6th largest economy in the world as state of California. You know, a happy place, a place of successful people, movie stars, and beautiful beaches, beautiful music, happy place. And then they decided to tear it down. And look at what he just said about California. You know, Jerry Brown and Gavin Newsom have been working to take apart the power grids, the structure of California's ability to be productive, you know? And is that exactly what we've been told is going to happen? That they are going to gradually but surely reduce our ability to produce energy, which makes us dependent upon them, while they are securing their own different ways of providing energy. Specifically, what we are seeing is these nuclear reactors that are going to be, for instance, deep underground, and the type of small nuclear reactors that can provide power presumably safely, where they would have the exclusive control over it, because they would have control over the uranium or whatever the material is that provides the nuclear power. And as they phase out our ability to generate our own power through coal or nuclear or oil, they make power come from more expensive sources, such as wind power. You know, nobody's ever really explained whether wind power is actually financially viable or not. They just send in a lot of propaganda about how, you know, it's going to replace the fossil fuels that are spoiling our air. But, you know, going back to windmills is kind of like going back to the economy of the 1700s or the 1600s. If you really think about it, that's why they don't use windmills anymore, because it's not efficient, nowhere near as efficient as burning coal and burning oil and, you know, the nuclear stuff that we are aware that they have. Andy's showing us one NuScale power module. So these kind of power modules are real, and there's this whole program of, there's a bank of nuclear power in Kazakhstan, right? And this is all tied up to the Belt and Road project, where George Webb has been reporting on that, and how these rat lines or the routes for this are kind of being forged by covert operations involving U.S. materials and different means of getting rid of local populations, as we were talking earlier, whether it's people or elephants or trees. If they're in the way, they got to go. So California is the example for where the rest of us are going to find ourselves, and they're not investing in our power grid. This is the Fabian thing. This is the Eloy and the Morlocks, right? The Morlocks are going to be operating everything underground, in the Raven Rock facility, and they'll be under there and they'll have their protective stuff and they won't be subject to the radiation, and they'll have this whole thing technologically worked out, and then we'll be living on the surface, doing maybe not a whole heck of a lot, just having these nice little short lives, and that power that they will have will be exclusive to them, and they'll be like gods to us, and they'll do whatever they want to do with us. It'll be like they're like these Mount Olympus characters that run the economy from subterranean, just like H.G. Wells's Time Machine has predicted. That's where they want to take us, to us being serfs and them being these technological masters, the master race. So now, just to wrap up the show, what is our new direction? What is Reset America? Well, let's start by following the lead of Mr. Gallagher there, whose pamphlet, and Andy, maybe you can go to that link for us, is called The Great Leap Backward. And it's a very brand new publication by LaRouche Pub. And what it is it's a 68-page booklet that you can get a hardcover, or you can download it, and it is the details behind what we just heard from Mr. Gallagher to back up what we've just discussed. So, what do we do to reset? Yeah, to reset the republic. Okay, there we go. And that's the book that I've ordered mine, and I expect I'll have it today. There was a little bit of a glitch in trying to download it, so they're straightening that out now. But I will report more on it after I get the book. And I do want to invite the authors to be on the show, because if we've learned from Harley Schlanger, this is a British Empire, royal family generated mess that is a perpetuation of their system that's been going on since before the American Revolution. And we are the only hope of mankind, as Lincoln said. What was it, President's Day yesterday? Lincoln had said that, and George Washington said, don't get all divided up in political parties. What are they doing? They're dividing us in political parties. It's not us doing that. It's them doing it. So expose the fraud of the COVID-19 Great Reset. Talk about what's happening to California and Texas. Talk about the fact that without our own energy, we will turn back into Middle Ages economies based on windmills and water power. And the water won't be fit to drink. and the air won't be fit to breathe. It's that serious. They have bamboozled, so many of us for so long, and myself included, up till maybe 10 years ago. But it can be done, and we've got to talk people into fixing, all of the damage that's been done by these folks like, Jerry Brown and Gavin Newsom and Andrew Cuomo, and Phil Murphy, and the Biden crime family. Well, we can't attack it all at once, but we can talk about the necessity of an American reset along American lines, maybe steal their word reset and create and reform it into something that we can put together. This is the kind of reset that we need. We need investments in productive things. And one other word from Mr. Gallagher, which was I must have omitted that part, but what he said was the main thing that could help us right now would be to reinstate Glass-Steagall. And how many people have said that? Glass-Steagall will give us back investment banks where people invest in order to make money over a long term by creating something productive, by producing something, producing power, producing goods, producing food, producing things that people actually need and will pay good money for and earn money to create. Banks that will invest, as opposed to banks that we have now that are just speculating over and over again and using our credit, our full faith and credit, to speculate, to gamble with our futures. So let's get on board with that. Let's talk about Glass-Steagall and how to reinstate it. Well, that's my show, America, Reset America. Tonight, a great researcher from New Jersey, and we'll be talking, I'm sure, about Gibson Island and Governor Murphy and the insanity of what's gone on in his state. The great blogger at Deep State Analytics, Mr. Bill Taylor, will be with us tonight at 8 p.m. So please join us then, and thank you all very much. Stay around for the Biden Belton Road Show at noon. That's 5 minutes from now, right over on the Biden Belton Road YouTube channel. And thanks again, Andy DeBala, for all the great production support.